Hey friends, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project Copyrighted Edition for our video channel. This is Huck TV. She's the boss, she's the executive producer, and she's asleep. Actually, I don't think she is. I think she's awake. But we've had some mighty cold weather here in Montana. I mean, the other morning, she and I woke up, it was -10. Dad was dressed like an igloo, and she was pouncing around like it was 80 degrees outside. But, yeah, she's a good girl. Hey, I gotta just do the paperwork here. This is for the upcoming cruise. Yes, a Bigfoot cruise, November 9th through the 16th, 2025, Symphony of the Seas. It's gonna be me, Meldrum, Goboleski, Moran Mayor, and now's the time to sign up. I can already tell you that I've gotten word people are signing up, so we are all very grateful. It's going to be a big cruise. It'll be a lot of fun, and it'll be warm. It's done by Gather Up. Gather Up is one word. Gather Up Events. You go online, you can find it, or you can take a screenshot of the bottom right there and just click on it. All right. Well, let's get on with the show. So, when I was preparing for this segment, I had a lot of reminiscing about Scott Carpenter. Scott, you guys know, he's written some great books. He and I have been research partners for years, and he's probably one of the most trusted people I could be with in the woods. And that's saying a lot, because I've been with a lot of people, but Scott and I have been in some pretty hairy situations, and we've done a lot of investigative work together. The way somebody handles himself around witnesses, the way he handles himself around victims, it's all important, folks. And I know a lot of people make comments here about, oh, you know, this guy did this, this guy did that. But the bottom line is, what kind of person are they? And I would never hesitate to take Scott in front of anyone. And one of the stories, the second story today, has a lot to do with Scott and I. And we'll get into that in a minute. So people know I've written about 1,500 missing person cases. I've read probably 8,000 cases. And do dates mean anything? Incidents happen close to each other. Does that mean anything? Do factors in the disappearance mean anything, even if they're not profile points? I think they do. And I want you to pay close attention to what we're going to talk about today. And I think you're going to be surprised about some of the things that are going to come out. These two cases, if they haven't been talked about by people together, it would be a stunner to me. I think I'm the first guy that's ever put them together. And I wrote about them in books, but let's just get into it. First incident involves a man named Earl Funk. Earl was 49 years old. He was reported missing September 30th, 2008. He was born in Augusta County, Virginia. And he liked to vacation, get away for the weekends and things, at the family's 50 acres right on the perimeter of Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. He was a carpenter and a builder, and he was divorced. Quote, his family in the newspaper articles, etc., said it, that these mountains were his life. He'd been going to his family's property and running around in those mountains since he was 12 years old. In 2000, the cabin that sat on the parents' property burned to the ground. And he, along with some other family members, designed a new cabin for them, and he built it. That's impressive. His primary residence was in Staunton, Virginia. That's Earl. So Shenandoah National Park, not one of the big name national parks, but they do get 1,200,000 visitors annually. The lowest elevation is about 561 feet. Highest is 4,000, just a little bit over. Park was officially dedicated December 27th, 1935. And it's home to 27 species of reptiles, 200 different types of birds, 50 mammals, including white-tailed deer, bobcats, squirrels, chipmunks, skunks. And it's one of those parks that does have an entrance fee of $10. Now, one thing you learn when you talk about national parks is I thought all national parks charge for entry. But I learned that some of them don't. Great Smoky Mountain National Park, no entrance fee. We'll talk about that later. But Shenandoah. Now, where are we talking about? This is important. So, this is where the family property was at. Cedar Mountain, Virginia. This is Shenandoah National Park. Here's Quantico, Virginia, where the FBI Academy is at. Here's Fredericksburg, Virginia. Not that far from major population zones, folks. And when I talk to you about missing people, and I talk to you about profile points, etc., the one thing you should be gleaning from me that's ultra important is you do not have to be a long way from a population zone for bad things to happen. In fact, Scott Carpenter and I were one day sitting at a trailhead. He said, "You know, Dave, you ever get the feeling that right around the trailhead you're being watched?" I said, "All the time." He says, "Sometimes I think that something is watching us from the time we hit that trailhead. It's like they're watching us from our car." And that makes a lot of sense to me. Because over the years, I've written about so many people who have disappeared in close proximity to the trailhead. All right, just talking about Shenandoah. Now, the Funk cabin was used for hunting, and it was also used for ginseng collection, harvesting. And Earl would travel right to the perimeter of the park to harvest ginseng. Now, if you're not familiar with what ginseng is, I'm going to tell you. It's used in traditional medicines for centuries. It was used in China in 196 AD as they made a tonic from the root for chronic illnesses. And right now, today, ginseng fields exist in China and Korea. And when you harvest ginseng, unfortunately, you have to take the root with it because that's where the good stuff is. Now, I looked up more stuff about it that I'm trying to get a little deeper, and per WebMD, it's one of the most popular herbal medicines in the world. Some studies show that it boosts immunity. Several studies show it lowers blood sugars. And it may help concentrate, and it may help push off dementia. And there were some ginseng harvesting shows on TV that were highly competitive. Now, why do I tell you this stuff about ginseng? Ginseng has a lot of those properties to it that berries have. Yeah, that people who pick berries. That's right. Now, isn't that odd? I just think it's really odd. Well, on September 29, 2008, Earl was with family members at his cabin. And And he told them that he was going to go out, and he and a friend were going to ride the ATV out to the park perimeter and harvest some ginseng. And Earl drove his friend out to one location, dropped the friend off, and said, hey, I'll meet you back here at certain time, and we'll go back to the cabin. Okay. And he takes off. A couple, 2-3 hours later, Earl didn't come back for his friend. So his friend knew the general area where Earl was going. So he walked, found the ATV, started calling Earl's name. Nothing. No word, no nothing. His friend knew something was really wrong. And why? Not only did the family members know that Earl knew these mountains enough to write his own maps on them, but his friend also knew. Because Earl knew the best places to go to get ginseng, best areas to go to hunt, because he was 49 years old and he'd been coming to the mountains since he was 12. Walking, riding. So right from the beginning, his friend said, well, I knew that Earl wasn't lost. So I was calling his name, listening, and I never heard anything. And then I walked around the area, didn't find anything, didn't see anything. So his friend had to huck it back to the cabin, which was a pretty good distance. So he gets back to the cabin, and the family gets on other ATVs and drives out to the location where Earl left the ATV, and the family and his friends start searching the area. And it was dark now. And it was September. Not real cold yet. And they searched all the way through the night. They never gave up. Calling his name, looking for him, nothing. So they got there, the family got there at like 9 o'clock at night. It wasn't too late. If Earl was around that ATV, he should have heard his family members calling his name. There's no doubt. Well, they brought an extra key for the ATV. Early the next morning, they're in great despair. They're very worried. And they drive back to their cabin and they call the Albemarle County Sheriff. Now here's the frustrating part about this if I was that family. You as the family owning the property probably know the area better than the sheriffs do. If you can't find Earl, what makes you think they can? That would be my frustration and my thoughts. But the county sheriff calls Virginia State Police. They send canines. Greene County Sheriff sends deputies. Delmarva Search and Rescue sends canines. Volunteer searchers. Within a couple days, they had 150 people that were grid searching that area of Cedar Mountain. This is the area they were in, Cedar Mountain. That was that area on the map I showed you. Very rural, thick, wild. Well, search teams from as far away as Rhode Island were showing up. Searchers had a start point. This is one of the problems in many searches. You don't have a start point. The ATV was the start point. And then it's a guarantee from that point there should be a scent trail and the dog should follow it. But they couldn't find a scent trail to follow very far. The National Park Service agreed to assist on the search. Even though Earl was not in the park, he was right on the border of the park. So that was really nice of the NPS to step up and help. The first 8 days of this were ultra frustrating. They're not finding anything. There's no clues. They're grid searching 100 and 150 people a day, 3 and 4 canines a day. They're pushing out. They decided to stay out 1.5 miles from the ATV. But there was also something else. The family said that Earl had an undiagnosed condition that greatly restricted his ability to move. That's all they said. So some kind of disability, but they didn't say anything more about it. Day 9. Searchers maintained that 1.5 mile radius from the ATV. And on the 9th day, they found something very odd. Now let's stop there. You got 100 to 150 searchers. You're working this perimeter around the ATV. It should have been saturated by day 4, and you should be stumbling over each other 4 and 5 times covering the same area. But now suddenly, they find something very odd. They found a trail of items that later were confirmed to be Earl's. They found his machete, his hat, a tent stake that he used to dig up the ginseng, a pack of cigarettes, and drumroll, 1 boot. And they were strewn along the trail. Now, if you're an experienced follower of Missing 411, what are you thinking right now? Yeah, right. Well, the first thing they did when they collected these items, they didn't know that they were Earl's, but they got him back to the search zone and they showed him to the family. They said, yeah, but why would his boot be off? Why would he not have his machete? So a lot of these things remind me of things that would be kept in a sheath or in pockets. And if you're turned upside down, you're turned on your side, these things may drop off. So day 10, they really focus on this area hard. They come up with nothing. They bring the dogs back into the same area because obviously those things have to have their Earl scent on them, right? Nothing. Day 11, same thing. Expanded out slightly. Dogs back into the same area. They're not finding any tracks that are going to lead them anywhere. They're getting frustrated. Day 12. They expand the area even larger. And one searcher is near the bottom of a rocky ledge that's 100 feet off the ground. He's below it. And in some thick bushes, they find Earl, dead. When they released the information to the press that day on day 12, everyone wants to know, well, what was the condition of the body? We're not saying. What was the cause of death? We're not saying. It's like, why can't you say the condition of the body? Were there bruises? Was he bleeding? Were there broken bones? They sort of implied that he fell and died from the fall. That was the implication from the way they emphasize, oh, he was below a cliff and blah, blah, blah. So that was on October 12th. All the rest of October, nothing. All the rest of November, nothing. December 15th. What they were doing is they were waiting for chemical analysis to come back. Blood, urine. They were looking for drugs, things like that. Well, there's a very short statement. The autopsy concluded Earl died of exposure. What? 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 That does not make sense. How did the items that would normally be in his pocket be strewn on the trail? That's number one. Number two, how did Earl's boot come off? Remember at the beginning, or just a second ago, I said that the implication was that he might have walked off that cliff. Look was snoring. So something else was going on before Earl decided to lay down and die. There's never a statement of any broken bones. Never a statement that he fell. Nothing other than exposure. Remember, his family was on that scene just after dark that first night. And they were calling his name. He didn't die from exposure that quick. There's no way. Something else was going on before Earl died. It's possible for anyone to get lost anywhere. I will give to that. But not 12 days of being lost. And if you've been visiting an area since you were 12 years old, there's no way you're going to die that quick without people hearing you or you hearing them. It was never released what day he died. And they can tell by temperatures of the body versus temperatures in the outdoors. They can get real refined about that. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. If Earl died of exposure, as they say, he had to have been alive when his family was looking for him. Was Earl even in that area? If canines couldn't have picked up the scent to where Earl was, why? Here's the motorcycle, here's the body. He may have taken a circumference route to the body to where he laid down, but that scent trail still went from A to B. Why not? What happened? How did multiple canine units fail to pick up a scent? One dog, two dogs, maybe. More than that, I don't believe it. I've talked about this before. There were several times, and they're very sad, where I had to work a fatal accident when I was in patrol. One case I'll never forget is a person was crossing this road, and they obviously weren't paying attention, and a car coming down the road at 40 miles an hour in a 45 zone hit this person, and they were wearing tennis shoes that were tied, laces were tied, and they knocked the person right out of the tennis shoes. They were dead on the scene. But a lot of people have asked me, well, Dave, we always hear these stories about people getting knocked out of their shoes. Good point. I don't think that whatever is happening out there happens that abruptly. Because if it happened that abruptly, there would be injuries to the body. Dislocations, things like that. Nothing like this is ever reported. They also never reported what Earl was wearing when he was found. Why not? Earl was not lost. Keep that in your mind. If he was not lost, why would he lay down to die? Why didn't Earl's friend hear him calling for help? Or why didn't Earl hear his friend calling his name? I'm going to bring this up again. GHB. If Earl got dosed very heavy with GHB, he would lay there, he would not be able to talk, he would not be able to move, and he would die right there if it was cold enough of exposure. I want to know what the contents of his stomach were. As an example, if his family said, oh yeah, you know, he left at 3 o'clock, but at 2 o'clock he had a sandwich and some milk and blah, 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 blah. Well, if he died within about 10 or 12 hours, there should be something in his intestines, in his stomach. If he'd been alive for days, it'd be nothing. I'm going to leave this to you one last time. If there is no scent trail to that body, why? Why couldn't trackers find any tracks to the body? Why couldn't they track anything from the ATV to the body? Why didn't he hear anybody calling his name? Why didn't they hear him calling for help? Okay. I've banged that drum enough. But now I'm going to bang another one. Let's keep this in mind. The man I just told you about was Earl Funk, 49 years old, missing September 30th, 2008. Right on the perimeter of Shenandoah National Park. His body was found just 100 yards from the park border. I forgot to tell you that. This next case involves a man 51 years old, missing August 23rd, 2008. Yeah. 38 days between these two disappearances. This man I'm going to talk to you about disappeared right on the border of Smoky Mountain National Park off an ATV. So, two-year age difference between the two people. Both of them white males. Both of them contractors. Isn't that weird? Very weird. Both of them riding an ATV. Both of them disappeared off the ATV. This case is one near and dear to my heart because it's a case that Scott Carpenter and I investigated together. It involves a man named Mike Herren. If you can believe this, Mike Herren lived in Maryville, Tennessee, the same city that Scott Carpenter lived in. Mike was a very accomplished carpenter and contractor. He had a house in Maryville, but he also had a house in a place called Happy Valley. Happy Valley is a location right next to Smoky Mountain National Park. He was born and raised in Tennessee. He had 3 boys and was divorced. Every weekend, Mike would drive his truck and trailer and lawnmower from his home in Maryville to Happy Valley. He would pull in front of his house, park the truck, get out, go into the house. Get back in the truck, turn it around, drive a couple blocks to his parents' house, right in the same neighborhood, and mow their lawn, just like a good son. Well, on August 23rd, 2008, Mike drove his truck to Happy Valley and parked it right in front of his house, just like he did every time. He got out of the truck, went up to his front door, unlocked the door, went inside, and dropped off his cell phone, his keys, his gun, his wallet, his money. Put it all on the counter. A routine he did every weekend. Up to that point, everything was normal. Nothing was unusual. 3 different Herrens live in that neighborhood. Mike, his mom and dad, and his mom and dad's sister, his aunt and uncle. Nobody knew about that, but I'm going to tell you about it in a second. So then, after he dropped his stuff on the counter, Mike would take the keys, jump in the truck, and go down and mow the lawn. But today was different. August 23rd, 2008 was different. For some reason. Mike, at that point, when he dropped everything on the counter, walked into his garage, and he had 3 ATVs. He picked out one, took it out of the garage, and he took it for a drive in the neighborhood. Now let's stop there for a second. First of all, the neighborhood here, I spent an entire day in it. Nice neighborhood, right on the edge of National Park, very rural. There's a lake nearby. Abrams Creek is behind his house. Lots of wildlife. If you wanted wildlife, you'd want to live in this neighborhood. So, let me show you the map. So this is where Mike lived, right here, on Bell Branch Road. This is where his house is, right there. And up here on the far right, this is Abrams Creek Campground. This is Abrams Creek right here. Now, this actually goes right behind his house down here. But in this area through here, there's all kinds of paved roads. This is in Blount County, Happy Valley. So you have Bell Branch Creek, you have Mill Creek, you have water everywhere through here. Very rural, very pretty. And it's not like parts of it is like a normal neighborhood where there are homes next to each other, but then other areas are not. So Mike takes off on his ATV, and late in the day, his parents were wondering what's going on because he said he was going to come by. So they get in their car and they drive over to his house, and there's his truck and the mower. And they have the keys to his house, so they go inside and they see he's dumped everything like he normally did, but he's not around, and they notice one of the ATVs is gone. So they wait till the next morning thinking, maybe he went to go see a friend and he's going to come by the next day. Next day he doesn't show up. Everything's the same. So they call his 3 sons. And they drive out to the house. And they get there and they know something's wrong. They call the Blount County Sheriff. So the sheriff gets there. And they start searching the house like they should. Search the backyard. And then they start looking around. And they find his ATV pretty quickly, 1 mile from the house. On Adams Creek Road. And the ATV was sitting in idle. The ignition switch was turned on. Or the ignition switch was on, but it was turned off using the kill switch on the ATV. And his boys said that they didn't think he'd ever do that. And it was placed in gear. I'll explain this more in a second. And the ATV was less than 1/4 mile from the entrance point to Great Smoky Mountain National Park. The Blount County Sheriff knew something was wrong. So they brought in a helicopter, horses, canines, ground pounders, and the National Park Service also showed up. Even though this wasn't in their jurisdiction, they still searched. Just like in Earl's case, remember? And amusingly, about the third day of the search, the Blount County Sheriff says, we can find no foul play on this incident right now at all. What? 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 Wait a minute. A man's missing under suspicious circumstances. How can you say there's no foul play? The ATV is in gear, up a steep hill. It's in a driveway of a summer home that hadn't been open in weeks. What's going on? So I knew about this case. And in August 2011, I had a 2-week planned trip to spend with Scott together investigating a variety of things. The day before we went to research Mike Herren, we went to the parents' home of Dennis Martin, a little boy who disappeared in Rocky Mountain, or in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And I can tell you it was one of the most stressful, intense, demoralizing meetings I've ever had with anyone. I don't want to get way into that, but when I met Mr. Martin, I felt like he had lost his soul when he lost his son. And Scott and I spent hours afterwards that day just kind of talking to each other about what we just went through, what we just heard from this man. But the next day we said that we were going to investigate the Mike Herren case, so we did. So we went to the location of his house, we drove around the neighborhood, and then I'm somebody, I believe you can't hit a home run unless you step up to the plate. There's homes in this area. Some of them look like they were summer homes. Most of the homes didn't look occupied. But one home pretty close to Mike's did look occupied. So we walked up to the door. And friends, sometimes I don't know what happens. As we walked up to this door, Scott and I both looked at each other and says, "Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness." It was a nice house. Nothing special, just kind of a regular house. But at Mr. Martin's house the day before, I saw something I'd never seen before. Adjacent to the front door was a doorbell. And what it was a giant, it was very colorful, like professionally painted woodpecker that was leaning back. And you pull a rope and the woodpecker hits this pad on the door, and that's the door knocker. It's really nice. Friends, we walk up to this door in Mike's neighborhood, and there is the exact same door knocker. I asked Scott, I said, "Scott, you've lived here your whole life. Have you ever seen one of those?" "Okay, that's only the second time in my life I've ever seen one." So I knew God sent us to this house. Something's going to happen. And I don't know if it was good or bad, but I knocked on the door, and this older lady came to the door, and she was so friendly and so nice. And it was Mike Herren's aunt. It was 1 in a million. We told her why we were there. We were investigating Mike's disappearance, and we really don't have a lot to go on. And we wanted to know if she knew anything. She goes, "Yeah, I saw Mike every weekend, and we're super close, and the family's still devastated." And, oh my gosh. So is that just good luck? I don't know. But she says, I'll gladly show you where they found the ATV and take you around. So her and her husband got in the car and they drove us all over. We followed them. And they get to the spot where the ATV is at. And we pull up and get out of the car, and they're not out of the car. And she said, yeah, she explains it's in gear. It's parked in the driveway of this house. It's a steep hill. It's like you're accelerating up the hill, you pull into the driveway, you leave it in gear, and then either he was pulled off or he took off running. I don't know. But the answer is, Dave, we don't feel comfortable getting out right here. Something's not right with this area. I don't know what it meant. I don't know what it meant. But at that point, I didn't feel anything odd. Other than knowing that this was the last place somebody could put Michael. So we greatly thanked that lady and her husband. And then Scott and I drove around that area for another 3 hours. And yeah, the woodpecker thing, I don't know what to make of that. I should say that while Blount County was searching for Mike, they actually made a mention of heavy rains that they had to shut down the search for a while. Mike has never been found. What could have happened to him? Now I've talked this exact case out with other law enforcement people, and they brought up a couple good points. Michael switched from his routine for some reason. So as he's driving into his house, did he see something that made him think, I want to go back out there with my ATV because I'm pulling a trailer right now, so I'm not real mobile. But whatever he saw didn't make him think danger. And why is that? Because he left his gun on the counter in his kitchen. But what did he see? Did he see something running between two houses and that's why he pulled into that driveway and ran? I don't know. I wish I understood. But Mike was a good person. Took care of his parents. Not many kids do these days. And I never met his parents, but I met his aunt and uncle, and they were salt of the earth, nice people. So, now do you see the comparisons between these stories? Both of them happened right on the edge of a national park. The men were 2 years apart in age, and the incidents happened 38 days apart. 38 days. One man's found under extremely suspicious circumstances, and one man's never found. I'm sorry, I think it's odd. Some of you may say, hey, he's making a mountain out of a molehill. Okay, fine. Mike Herren's case has always bothered me. By the way, this is the Blount County Sheriff's missing person report. I'm sorry, missing person poster on Mike. I want his boys to know that there's people out there that still think about their dad every day and know that something very, very odd happened to him. Friends, those are the two cases for today. Let's remember, this is the kindness revolution. When Scott and I knocked on that older couple's home, they didn't have to be kind to us. They didn't really know who we were, but they were nice. And they went out of their way to help us. That was an optimum description of kindness right there. In fact, Scott and I talked about that. Those people were so friendly. Two big guys at their front door. Scott's bigger than me. Scott was like 6'3", 6'4". But they were nice. Thank you. Please share this on your social media. Let me give you a look at Huck here. She kind of turned around, so see if she can give you a side eye right now. Hey girl, are you awake? Huh? You awake? Huh? You good girl. You good girl. You good puppy. You good puppy. Paulides out.